This disaster killed more people than most wars, and almost no one talks about it. In 1931, nature unleashed one of the deadliest catastrophes in recorded history. Not a world war, not a nuclear explosion, not a pandemic, a flood. What happened in China that year would drown entire cities, collapse food systems, and leave millions dead. And yet, outside of history books, it's barely remembered. To understand how it happened, you have to understand China in the early 1930s. At the time, millions of people lived along the Yangtze, Yellow, and Huai Rivers. These rivers were lifelines. They irrigated crops, powered trade, and supported entire civilizations for thousands of years. But they were also unpredictable. For centuries, the Yellow River had been called China's sorrow because of its devastating floods. Still, people stayed. The soil near the rivers was fertile. Farming depended on them. Life depended on them. Then, the pattern of nature began to shift. In the years before 1931, parts of China experienced severe drought. The ground hardened and cracked. Crops failed. The land became dry and brittle. Then came a brutal winter. Heavy snow buried vast regions, snow piled high across river basins and farmland. It looked peaceful, quiet, still. But when spring arrived, temperatures rose rapidly. The snow melted fast, pouring massive amounts of water into rivers that were already vulnerable. Then the monsoon rains began, and they didn't stop. Storm after storm soaked the land. Rivers swelled beyond their banks, and as if that wasn't enough, multiple typhoons struck China in the same season, something extremely rare. It was a perfect storm of disasters stacking on top of each other. The rivers could not contain the pressure. In the summer of 1931, the Yangtze River overflowed catastrophically. The Huai River followed. The Yellow River surged. Levees broke. Dikes collapsed. Entire regions vanished beneath water. Cities disappeared. Some areas were submerged for months, not days, not weeks, months. Imagine surviving the first wave of flooding, climbing to higher ground, believing the worst had passed, only to realize the water wasn't going anywhere. Homes were swallowed, farmland erased, infrastructure destroyed. But drowning was not the main killer. The real catastrophe came afterward. Crops had been wiped out, rice fields were ruined, livestock drowned in massive numbers, food storage facilities were destroyed. Millions of people suddenly had nothing to eat. Famine began spreading through already devastated regions, and then disease followed. Cholera, typhoid, dysentery, malaria. Refugee camps became overcrowded, clean water was scarce, medical care was limited. Entire communities were weakened by hunger and exposure. The flood destroyed the land, the famine destroyed the people. Estimates suggest between 1 and 4 million people died as a result of the 1931 floods. The numbers vary because record-keeping was inconsistent and the country was politically unstable at the time. But even the lowest estimate makes this one of the deadliest natural disasters in human history. To put that into perspective, the death toll rivals or exceeds many wars, yet globally, it's rarely discussed. Why? Partly because China in the early 1930s was facing internal political turmoil, communication systems were limited, international media coverage was not what it is today. And within a decade, the world would be consumed by global conflict on a scale never seen before. History remembers wars vividly. It often forgets disasters, even the ones that killed millions. But the 1931 floods reveal something deeply unsettling. Civilizations are fragile. We build cities near rivers because they give us life. We depend on natural systems. We engineer levees and dams and infrastructure to control them. But sometimes nature doesn't cooperate. Sometimes it overwhelms everything. The floods of 1931 weren't a single dramatic moment, they were a chain reaction. Drought, snow, rapid thaw, monsoons, typhoons, structural failure, famine, disease. One vulnerability exposing the next. It wasn't just water that caused devastation, it was how dependent society had become on stability. When the rivers rose, they didn't just flood land, they exposed how quickly systems can collapse. Today, modern flood control systems are more advanced, forecasting is better, infrastructure is stronger, but the lesson remains the same. When nature shifts beyond expectation, the consequences can multiply faster than anyone anticipates. The 1931 China floods were not just a natural disaster. They were a reminder that even the most established civilizations exist at the mercy of forces far larger than themselves. Millions of lives were lost, entire communities were erased, and the world moved on. This was the flood that drowned millions.